Hey guys, it's Souren, and welcome to our new series that we're doing on TOK. I decided instead of trying to just go over different areas of knowledge or ways of knowing, we're just going to go straight into the prescribed titles for 2021 and break them down. Now, this isn't how to write an essay course, this is more of a discussing ideas and looking at different ways of knowing and areas of knowledge and how you would go about trying to answer the question um, using those. It's mostly to spark some ideas. Don't use these are very preliminary ideas, but it's just there to get you going on how to think about TOK and make it a bit more clear on what you could include in an essay. So, we're starting from prescribed title 1, and it goes: accepting knowledge claims always involves an element of trust. Discuss this claim with reference to two areas of knowledge. Now, I'd say this is a difficult question. For any TOK topic, there needs to be some divisiveness in the question so you can kind of break it down for and against. I think this question is much more lenient on being true, and therefore I think it'll be kind of difficult to write about it. But there's obviously some things you can always talk about, and we're going to go into them very quickly. And first thing we need to do, and first thing you should always do in your essay, is talk about key phrases and what they mean to you. Now, the key phrase here is trust, or the key word is trust, but I put accepting knowledge there as well because it's where you have to bring in the idea of personal versus shared knowledge. Now, that's important because it's a TOK word, and you need to include an idea of personal versus shared knowledge at some point in your assignment, in your essay. This is a way for you to give an extra layer of work or extra layer of an analysis and distinguish between what you would consider something that's subjective to you, and you could go your entire life, for example, having certain faith, or I guess believing if vaccines work or don't. It's personal. But there's also an element of shared knowledge, and you need different degrees of trust, maybe more, maybe less. And the degree of trust also comes where you get that degree of trust from, and that's where I think the idea of authority versus knowledge is important. And I included that in there because it's good for you to have a distinction between trust in the sources of knowledge versus the trust in knowledge itself. It's important for you to say, I believe in science because I can see it with my own eyes. I don't know, humans exist, so biology must be right. Or it's, I believe in science because I believe in the scientific method and the people who use it and the people who have to spend their lives getting a scientific degree. It's good to make that distinction. Now, what I've done is I've gone into mathematics and religion. I'll get to religion in a bit. And what I've done is a very systematic approach for you to try to discuss ideas. On the left, I'm making the claim that you don't need trust as much in mathematics. And on the right side, I'm saying you do. And it's good for you to have a very clear yes and no. Probably not for your actual essay, but for you to structure it or plan it, I'd advise you to go like this. All right, so I have mathematics, and the first thing I do is what way of knowing is mostly used in math. There's multiple, but I went with reason because it's the one that's most applicable here. And my argument for not needing trust would then be, well, mathematics is independent of observer, and by what I mean by that is that regardless of humans on Earth or any aliens, there's a common consensus that mathematics would be the same thing regardless of who comes up with it, because it's there whether you see it or not. Mathematics would have been the same thing when we don't know about it. Maybe calculus or algebra all existed, and it's not as much trust in it because it's something that's there. And if mathematics, it requires proofs, if it requires you to show statements are true, then if they're true, then you don't need to have any faith in it because that's how system of mathematics is built. And because it's so rigorous, and may make clear that when talking about the idea of trust, it's important to say that if you keep replicating data or keep analyzing data and you just don't take it in first time, there is a lack of trust in there. And for you to be able to write this essay, you need to make that distinction, that I think the lack of trust comes from having to replicate an idea 300 times. Maybe in the scientific method, you could be like, because the scientific method requires replicability in the data, there's not as much trust in what comes out of our scientific method. Now, on the other side, you could kind of build on the fact that there's axiomatic systems. And if you look through axiomatic systems, that basically means that there's some postulates, which means there's some basic ideas that you think are true, and you basically build everything on top of them. Now, if you learn more math, this is kind of tricky, but for TOK level, it's a very good idea, and it's mentioned in the textbook, and it's a good idea to build upon, because you can make the argument that, well, we've assumed some things to be true, and then we build upon it. And mathematics is a kind of a complex system of, if this is true, then this is true. But if this first statement is not true, then we can't make any conclusions about the second one. And if our assumption is incorrect, then so is our conclusion. Therefore, we're putting trust into our system, into our postulates of what we think is true. And that's where you go more into kind of discovery versus invention. I guess if math is invented and we kind of make up the postulates, then the rest of our math is very much invented, and, well, we need to have more trust in it. But if it's discovered, then we don't need to trust how correct the system is as much, because, well, if math is discovered, then it's there regardless, and we just need to kind of accept it rather than trust that it's true, because it has to be innately true if it's discovered. I also wanted to look at religion, and I would advise you definitely not to do religion, because it's a very tough thing to do, but I wanted to just go over it because it's a good practice of kind of a difficult thing that you shouldn't touch, but the more difficult it is for you to do it, the more you learn by doing it. So the way of knowing I chose was faith, and I tried to break down faith. And this is where definitions come in, and faith by definition is putting trust into something, and it requires you to kind of believe in something that you're not sure about. And that is trust, that is by definition trust. So it's a very simple idea to go through religion and why the element of trust is needed, because, well, that's what it is. So I'm going to focus more on the other side, where we're trying to kind of debate that idea. And I'm trying to make the argument that getting to faith requires for you to have a lack of trust. And the way we're going to do that, and the way you could actually apply this to other ways of knowing or areas of knowledge, is that I'm going to make a distinction between getting to knowledge and having knowledge, right? The process of getting to knowledge. So my argument for faith is that for you to believe in something, you need to rigorously go through investigation, right? So just the same way where in history and any history textbook, there has to be analysis of primary sources and secondary sources, checking with other things. This is a very, I guess, untrustful way of gaining knowledge, because you have to counter check things with other things and try to come up with the most streamlined and correct idea of what something is, and then present that. But when the result comes, you have much more faith in the result because of how untrusted you were in, untrusted, I don't know if that's a word, untrustworthy you were in the process of getting to the knowledge. Right. So I'm saying for me to believe in something, and this is where the idea of personal versus shared knowledge comes in. I'll talk about it in a bit. But for me to believe in something, I need to investigate it. Especially for me to completely believe in something, for me to put my whole trust into something, there needs to be such a rigorous investigation of it that then for me to get to it, it requires me to have zero trust and build upon that. And then you can make the argument of, for you to have complete faith, you need to go through a phase of discovery and, I guess, challenging ideas. And that's where faith comes in. And for you to have true faith, you need to be not trusting of the sources. And kind of like that, you can pick apart the process of getting to knowledge, if that is axiomatic knowledge in mathematics, if it's investigation of your faith in religion, if it's the scientific method in science. And then we go on to the actual knowledge, where it's the conclusions of mathematics, or if it's the theories of science, or having faith in something. So by making a distinction between process of knowledge and actual knowledge, you can, for any area of knowledge, you can say that because a process needs to go through some rigorous challenges to get to a final idea, there is some element of untrustworthiness in it and challenging the ideas. And that's a very broad way of looking at it, but if you look more into different areas of knowledge, you should be able to figure out some ways that maybe lack of trust builds knowledge within itself, and you can counter that. Anyways, thank you guys. I hope your essays go well. I'll be back soon with the second question, and see you then.